I will sort my bloating out. Welcome, bienvenue. Welcome once again to another property podcast. This is Construction Matters. We don't have it that often, but when we do, it's often with the incomparable Michelle Carr, a founder of H Squared Construction Limited, and a proponent, a supporter, one might say, of the subcontractor, of the people who are often overlooked and underrepresented. Of course, it would be incomplete to have a property podcast if Hamish McClay of Search Convey wasn't here, but here it is indeed. In fact, sir, if you wouldn't mind starting us off.
Well, this week we're actually the subject sort of rather reminds me of a great old Rolling Stones record I used to like. I think it was from their first album, actually. Time is on our side. Well, it depends how you look at time. Time is a difficult thing to actually capture. However, moments aren't so challenging. And I think the topic we're speaking about today is about early intervention. And it's not even so much early intervention. I think it's very much to do with sort of planning. Something Michelle is particularly sort of good at. And sometimes we just cannot tell what's going to come up in terms of the development of the project that we're actually sort of working on. Fine one. I set up to do this wonderful project, and somebody was saying, "Oh, you do this great stuff." Took on the project, and I said, "Right, that's working out really, really well. We've got the quality right. We've got absolutely everything right." And then the client turned around and sort of said to me, "Right," he said, "that's absolutely sort of great. Now, what we want is at 2/3 of the price." And I thought, "Hey, look, sorry, old chap. How do I get 2/3 of the quality? What do you want me to cut out?"
Yes, exactly. Which part?
And he went silent. And I said, "Well, I'm not going to check anything at that sort of price. I'll just sort of throw it at you, and basically you sort the stuff out yourself."
Right.
Well, basically, as we agreed. Now, unfortunately, very, very often, and this is one of the things that Michelle's got absolutely great at, and she's going to explain about this, it's so very, very important to establish what is critical to start off with. You do need things can go wrong. Don't get me. You can't actually guarantee absolutely everything. However, the better planned events are, particularly to do with construction, the more effective it can be. And the longer we leave it, it's a little bit like sort of any sort of ill ease, like disease. The longer we leave it, the harder it is to recover. And that's what we're speaking about today.
Michelle, welcome back to the show. I remember, if I'm going to misquote someone, time is an illusion. Lunchtime, doubly so. But I've always wanted to labour under the conception that one should always give bad news early, and the longer you sit on it, the more it festers and turns into a pulsating sore. Would you agree?
Yeah. I think I try to get this message out a lot. I do a lot of crisis intervention work and turning companies around, and actually it's a lot easier if you come to me before you're in crisis. And the sooner you get to me and the sooner I get involved in a project or a business, the more options we have, and the longer you leave it, there are just less and less options. And that happens with everything in construction, whether it be a project. The amount of times I've sat on client side and somebody is pushing to get the project started, and I'm like, "What? We're not ready." And an extra week at the front end before you've even started the project can save you between 4 and 6 weeks at the back end. And bearing in mind, once you've started a project, that's when your prelim costs start. And it's never made sense to me. But definitely, the earlier that you look at something, the better it is. The more, well, you just have more options.
Do you find that people like to labour on with their head in the sand until people shake the cage so roughly that they have to take notice?
Well, I call it lastminute.com disease. And there is a bit of a toxic positivity in construction. And I think because we're an industry that's very good at pulling it out of the bag.
What do you mean? Like, it'll all be all right on the night, sort of
it's going to be okay. We'll figure it out. It will be okay. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. And some businesses that I've spoken to that I've known for a number of years, like, we need to do something. Yeah. We're okay. We need to do something. And then I get a phone call. They've got a winding up order. And often it's way too late. Or they've got an adjudication, or they've got a number of debt collectors after them, or whatever it may be. They've got all these things going wrong. Or a payment, an issue. I mean, most people come to me with a cash flow problem, and it's very rarely anything to do with cash flow. It's to do with the fact that the company just isn't making any money.
Right. I mean, in your experience, when people come to you, crisis management, you said, are you able to pull a rabbit from hat, or is it often a way of gracefully bringing them down to earth?
So I don't give up very easily. And I do my very, very best, but sometimes we have to have a conversation with an insolvency practitioner, and it's about restructure, which is not something I generally get involved in. But then I do help. It all depends on the circumstances. So I am working with liquidators now and helping them increase their debt portfolio. So when a contractor comes and they're in trouble, where they've got winding up, where they've become insolvent, administration, whatever it may be, they'll send me a final account and some information, a couple of conversations with some of the key people in the team, and I can tell you whether that final account can be increased considerably. I can have a look at their variation account and see whether or not they've been pricing variations properly. I mean, I can very quickly establish whether I'm going to make a difference, and whether the difference I'm going to make is substantial enough to cover my fee and some. On one occasion, the company didn't have to go into liquidation because I managed to get so much money back from them, from the projects they had ongoing. But it all depends on the situation. So if they're working on a big project and they've been kicked off by the client, or they've become insolvent and their insolvency practitioners have stepped in, or they're too far down the process, and most large construction projects will have step-in rights of some sort, collateral warranties, that kind of thing. And if it's already been taken away, it's very difficult, because once you get to that point, they then have to complete the project, and you're liable for, you will get any money that's left over, but there's never any money left over at that stage of the project if someone else is taking it over. But you may be liable for additional costs. So that's very, very difficult. But if somebody comes to me when their cash flow is really, really tight, their projects are suffering because people are pulling off site, or they might not even pull off site. I mean, what amazes me is how many people I speak to that are owed substantial amount of money and they're still on site. I mean, it baffles me. If you're not getting paid and you're 60, 90, even 120 days or more behind on payments, why are you still on site? Because you're
I've seen this before as well. And they're thinking, these guys haven't been paid. Their own subcontractors probably haven't been paid. Why are they still there? It is craziness. So it's about tipping points, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's all very well being optimistic.
No, it's not really about tipping points, because the construction industry is just not enough. It's not the same. So every project is different. Every business is different. Okay, every business leader you could have 100 people in the room, and they're probably only about 5 or 6 different archetypes, but generally they're different people, different projects, different systems. Even if you were building 2 buildings next to each other, they may not have the same ground conditions. They may not have the same design. The sunlight might be different. That would have an effect on, I don't know, the heat in the house, something like that. Like, it's very difficult to have things that are exactly the same in construction, unless obviously you're producing materials. So it's difficult to say this is the point that you need to get somebody in. But the amount of times I've had companies come to me and they're like, oh, we've got £10 million turnover, we're making 20% profit, but we're struggling with cash flow because our clients are paying us late. Okay, how much are you owed? And we go through it, and it's £400,000 or £500,000, substantial amount of money. And I always ask them, well, where's the other 1.5? But if you've got a £10 million turnover and you're making 20% profit, there should be £2 million sitting in the bank. So you've accounted for the 400,000 or 500,000. Where's the rest of it? And normally it transpires that, yes, I get the money from the client most of the time. Find out why they haven't paid. It may just be the fact that they're a bad client. And after a few contractual letters, we get paid, and tend to get paid regularly. I also use the mechanism in a contract. I spend a lot of time negotiating contracts over the last 25 years, so I know how that operates. But ultimately, a lot of the time is that they don't understand the overheads. They're not looking at the right information. They're making decisions based on incorrect information because no one down the line knows how to present it properly, or how to price jobs properly, or allocate costs properly. And actually, just sometimes presenting data in a very different format shows a very, very different picture. And often that's all I have to do to raise my point. And then I'll find where when you're reporting data and presenting it in a different manner, the holes just literally go, hey, look at me. I'm a big hole that's costing you £500 a week. I mean, I've got a client currently that works in an industry that I'm not that au fait with. They've had massive growth. There's more growth coming. Wants me to take over some of the commercial aspects of the business. And so we agreed that I was going to go and do the valuation. Now this is valuation 3. So I went on site last week. It was great. I really enjoyed it. I've been on site for a little while. But he said to me that he's losing money on the back end. I've seen where they're losing money in week 10. It just doesn't become apparent until the end of the project. So I need to have a conversation with that client saying, actually, we need to do X, Y, Z. This is what we need to do, because actually it's not the back end that you're losing your money. You're losing it right now. So let's plug that gap now to keep as much money and much profits and cash flow in your pocket. And we can have a look at everything else as we go along. But he will probably, if this project wasn't in this point, he may have got me to have a look at a project that was in, I don't know, month 14, 15 and 16 to see where, tighten that process up to see where they're losing money. That's probably his aim, but actually I can tighten it now.
Well, if you can do it up front, then of course that gives him much more flexibility of what his choices are further down the line, right?
And it surprised me because I've known this client for a very, very long time, and he's one of the most commercially astute clients I've ever had. And he's a main contractor. And I've known, and yeah, very, 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 very bright. And I'm surprised because the site was brilliant. It was very tidy, very clean, very organized. It was brilliant. But I saw many different little parts where money are being lost. And obviously I'm going to plug those holes, but it just goes to show that he's going to be surprised by that. And I don't look at saving money at the end of the project. That's just when the problems arise. That's when the symptoms occur, should we say, but the problem is long going.
Is it because people are too close to it and spent too much time looking at it and therefore just don't see the wood for the tree?
I think fresh eyes and oversight definitely help. I really do. But I actually think it's bigger than that. I think it's the fact that many people, so this particular client, in fact, majority of the clients I've ever worked for will walk into a project, and it doesn't matter whether it's a 100 grand project, a 50 grand project, or a 20 million pound project. They will walk in and they will know time and money to some extent. They'll know how much time they need program wise. They'll know roughly how much materials they'll need within reason. It'll be, I don't know, 700 cubic meters of concrete or whatever. They'll know roughly what they're doing. They'll walk in and how many lengths of substrate or how many, whatever. They'll know what materials they need. They'll know how many guys they need, roughly, give or take, and they'll know roughly how long it's going to take. That's what they are experts in. What they're not experts in is tracking change, tracking data, analyzing data, running a business, understanding what profit and loss is, what overheads are, how to cap them, how to present them, what is a project cost, what's an overhead, these kind of things. And nobody gets taught that. So you've got all these guys that go into construction that learn a trade, and they learn a trade really, really well. Often it will be father to son. We're now getting father to daughter, but maybe with me it might be mother to son, who knows.
That'd be cool.
But ultimately there's a lot of that going along within the industry, which is why I think things have stayed the way they are so long, because you've got, this is how we've done it and it passes down, whereas you don't get a lot of that in other industries. So you've got generation teaching the next generation, which is why these things have gone on for decades. We're just doing it the way but that's the way my dad did it. And there might be slight improvements with the way that there's many things that I do that I learned from my father. There's a lot that I've changed because of what happened to my dad. And he would happily tell you right now, if I was older when his business was in trouble, there's no way it would have gone into liquidation, no way. But I was only in my teens. But I learned so much from that. And I'm also aware of the things and he'll tell you the things that he did wrong. So I've learned from that. I think that's where my passion comes from anyway. But ultimately there is no one teaching anyone business. So you don't even get any commercial education as a trade. You don't even, I mean, I know someone recently, that a woman that was sent to me, because I do a lot of support of women in construction, who had done her route slightly differently. She's fully qualified as an electrician, but she didn't have any experience. And then when she got on site, she realized that she'd never been taught how to drill a hole. You can't do an electrical installation without using a drill. She didn't know what to do. She didn't even get that experience. And because then she didn't do the apprenticeship route. She did it slightly differently. And anyway, I think she's going to be absolutely fine. I've introduced her to a number of people and everybody thought she was brilliant. So there's not going to be any issues there, but it just goes to show that what you get taught at an education perspective isn't exactly what you need. And then you've got these people running these 10, 15, 20 million pound companies that have never had any business training or previous business experience potentially, or you've got children that are taking over their family business that again don't have any professional qualifications. I mean, my dad sent me to be a QS and it was great. And that's why I was a QS. That's why I did a degree, because you need an accountant and a QS. And I thought QSing was much more fun and accountants were boring. I think it would have been a great accountant or lawyer, sort of solicitor. But this is where I am. But that's what I think the issue is. It's a lack of experience and understanding. But also, we've got our entire industry. So solicitors cause trouble in our industry if they don't have any construction experience. Finance directors and anyone in finance, accountants, or accountancy department as such that don't have construction experience cause us a lot of trouble. Then you forget about all the people that with compliance that are throwing things at us left, right, and centre. And since Grenfell happened over the last sort of 6 or 7 years, we've been hit with so much, and the industry is really struggling. You've got 4,000 plus businesses going into liquidation every year and have done for the last 5 or 6 years running. And I genuinely believe that's because most businesses don't understand the cost of their compliance and other bits and pieces. So there's a much, much bigger picture to this, and it's about getting the support at the right time, and the right time is literally now, is the earliest opportunity you can get that support.
Dare I ask, is some of this down to the fact, your old bugbear, that people don't bother having contracts?
Yeah, a lot of it is. It's not that they don't have contracts, because a lot of people will have contracts now and they will sign them, or they'll understand. Oh, there's many people that don't understand just because you don't sign a contract that you've agreed to the assumption, you've agreed to the contract by action. So as soon as you turn up,
making that first payment, making some sort of payment is usually the way that
exactly. So that and often there is an issue that they don't understand the contract. There's many companies I know that will get a QS of some description to check their contract. But the difference between me and them is I don't just explain what your contract is. I also explain how you administer that contract. I'll give you systems and processes in order to abide by that contract. And I'll also, if I've got the opportunity to negotiate it in your favor, because there's a lot of time and there's a lot of contracts out there that have been written by solicitors that are pretty much impossible to adhere to, because they go against the grain of what construction actually is. And actually a lot of solicitors put their clients at risk because they just don't understand the processes and the people involved. And I know for a fact that you've got a client who's agreed a contract, they never send it down to their team and get their team to write it or understand what their obligations are. So you've got a whole heap of people running a project based on standard JCTs with a contract that's got 700 pages worth of amendments. It takes all the JCT out of a JCT. It's very complicated. Doesn't need to be. But actually, it's understanding how to administer that. But also, there are a lot of corrupt QSs, and they really don't help things either.
All right. Now, before I pass back to Hamish to close down the show, we've actually had a comment from an engineer, I believe, Ahmed Adik. Thank you. What we need to consider is that most contracts are prepared based on an assumed profit margin around 20%. So let me read it, and then you just give us some brief comments, if you wouldn't mind. However, when the project reaches the construction stage, the actual profit may become much lower due to changes, unexpected costs, and design modifications. Another important point is that many clients want to see detailed drawings and 3D visualization before construction begins. In many cases, they trust the 3D visualization more than the 2D plans.
So there are some elements of truth in that. So, I mean, I don't work on projects that are on a 20%, because if you're looking at a 30 million pound project, you've got no chance of making that kind of return. I do know a lot of contractors that will send out they'll send out all their procurement and they'll send out their tenders and they'll add 20% as a markup. But the markup is not just overhead, it's overhead and profit. And a lot of companies don't really understand the difference. A lot of companies running very successful business or business leaders don't fully understand the difference between overhead and profit, but also the fact that overheads are on a margin based on your turnover. So if your turnover changes, so does your profit and overhead. And a lot of the time they're wasting. I mean, the amount of times I go on sites and you've got, the first thing I have a look at is the schedule with the hiring, and they've got a socket and an extension lead that's been on hire for 89 weeks, which has cost the company about £700. We could have bought that for 50 quid or 30 quid or whatever. Things like that is where a lot of people will save money, and I know where to look and where to save them. But yes, there is a point. There are one of the massive things in construction where the biggest risks are, where people lose money, is not pricing variations properly. Yes. A lot of people don't want to charge the client extra, but ultimately, if the client's not operating in the way that they should be and they're physically preventing you from completing your project, they're making changes at bad minutes, they're giving you poor information, they're not giving you the design information on time, they don't deserve to not. You don't need to be protecting them. They need to be paying more because they're the ones causing the problem. And it's unbelievable how many clients I have that don't want to charge their client extra because they don't want to have it. And I'm like, if you don't charge them extra, there isn't going to be another project because you'll have no business.
No,
and there's a difference. You don't have to extort them.
Quickest way to end up with net zero, isn't it?
Exactly. And also, there's so many companies out there that are cutting their costs so low, and then they hit them. They make their money through variation accounts because they know how to price a variation properly. But then you've got the other companies that don't agree with that. They're competing at the lower level for the base rate of the contract, but they're not then getting their money back in the variation. So there is no competition. And that's why they're going bust out of the goodness of their souls, because they're moral people. They don't understand what they need, that's how it needs to be done to some extent. And then also what Ahmed Adik said, there are a lot of clients. Now, high-end resi, when I worked in high-end resi, I would understand that potentially the end user client doesn't necessarily understand a 2D drawing. So what I would do is walk around them on site and say, right, we've got the walls up or whatever it means. Before the first fix is completed, this door is opening this way. Your light switch is here. Your this is there. And every single time, oh, no, the door can't open that way. We've got a piece of furniture going there. Because all they care about is the 3D visuals and the furniture and the end result and the interior design. That's what they buy. They buy the interior design. And ultimately, they don't really care how the walls are made. They don't care. They just care about the end users when it's that kind of client. And it doesn't necessarily have to be domestic. It could be residential, could be a hotel, could be a bar, whatever it may be. They're looking at the aesthetics. And going back to what you said earlier, Hamish, about value engineering, for me, value engineering is getting the most for your buck, like the most money you can for every penny you spend. So if you're not bothered about the doors, the aesthetics of the doors, then let's not, unless they need to be a fire door, let's not make a big thing of them. Let's cut that budget. And if they don't have to be solid oak, you don't want them solid, we'll do a veneer. If they don't need to be a fire door, then they won't be a fire door. That you don't necessarily have the same architraves and skirtings and doors and handles and on back of house, save money on that. But if actually you want your back of house to look amazing, because part of your ethos within your business, for example, is the fact that you want your staff to feel really, really important, then we will spend money on your back of house. But it's all down to the client and what's more important to them. You've got to obviously be compliant and go with building regs. But other than that, it's let's spend the money where it's. If you don't care what the doors look like, let's not spend money on the doors. I had a client once we did a massive refurb of a beautiful, beautiful flat in Kensington. And she asked us to rip out all of it. It was a grade 2 listed, but we were able to do what we could inside. We couldn't touch the windows, we couldn't touch the external doors, but everything inside we could. So she wanted us to rip out all the really high skirtings and the beautiful architraves and all the coving, rip the whole lot out. And I was just like, oh no. And then she wanted this straight square edge, white everywhere. And I was just like, oh my God.
Ruining it.
Then when she moved in, which didn't make sense to me at the time, but made perfect sense when I went to see her because they had a problem with the bath. I walked in, she was an art dealer.
She wanted blank walls.
And it was one of the most beautiful places I've ever been to, because that's what she wanted to do. She wanted to take the character away and have you focus on the art. And she had the best shoe cupboard I've ever seen in my entire life. And I've been in some really nice houses. And I will have a shoe cupboard like that.
Michelle, do you understand? you may come it with us talking about you being this great QS and accountant lawyer. At heart, you are basically a woman. I'm sorry, there's no doubt about that.
There's nothing basic about it. I am a woman, and I'm proud of it. But yeah, I was just in awe of
You
this
lust
place.
after a large shoe covers, yes. All right.
But the thing that was what was important to her, and why were we going to spend money on these beautiful solid wood architraves and skirtings when she wanted the bare minimum just to do the job, the basic job, and she wanted all the doors very white, and she had this beautiful kitchen which was absolutely amazing, and this really amazing bespoke made furniture, but the rest of it was the artwork, and it was absolutely beautiful. And I'm so fortunate that they
get you to focus on the stuff you want to focus on, is make everything else plain.
But it made perfect sense, and that's what value engineering is all about. It's not about just slashing the price and taking a third off. It's about, okay, I always explain to people about when they've had projects done at their home, and they're like, oh, we've had this project and it went on 6 months longer and it was 100 grand more or whatever percentage more. And I was like, did you change anything? No, not a single thing, not a light fitting, not, oh yeah. And then, well, we did this and we did that, we did something else. I'm like, right. The way I explain it in the most simplest terms, if you're popping into Tesco, Sainsbury's or whatever, a little shop to get something for dinner, might cost you, well, these days probably cost you about 30, 40, 50 quid, but it will take you, 15, 20 minutes. Right. If you're going for a weekly shop, could be a couple of hundred, it's going to take you an hour. If you're going from your big monthly or you do a big quarterly shop or whatever it may be, it's going to cost you 400 quid. It's going to take you an hour and a half. Construction is no different. If you're adding things into the basket, it's going to cost you more and it's going to take you longer. It's as simple as that. And people don't understand that, okay, well, I had a light fitting, fine, but you still have to take that light fitting out of the basket, find a new light fitting that you want and put it in the basket. That still takes time. Okay, it doesn't take 30 seconds in a construction site. That could be 16 weeks because one light is off the shelf, the other one's bespoke and has to come from China or Italy, and if you don't order it before the 1st of June, you ain't getting it until October. And these are the kind of things that people don't understand, but why should they? So when I've got a client that I know doesn't understand construction, I help them and support them into being better clients, because I can't deliver a project unless they understand what they're doing. And I think and some people take advantage of that, and I just don't think that's right. We need to understand where our clients' perspective are. They could be a financier, they could be a famous football player. What are they going to know about construction, and why do we keep expecting them to understand drawings and understand construction?
Absolutely. We shouldn't be expecting them to know. So Hamish, we've had, as usual, a barrage of really cool information. No, I'm not. That's not negative in any way, Michelle. It's just there's a lot there, and there's never enough time to explain it all. Hamish, would you care to at least take us home, please?
Well, Michelle's actually covered sort of so much of it.
I know.
And one of the things she has emphasized is the importance of that client relationship, and it's understanding what the client is wanting to achieve. Now, sometimes they can't actually fully verbalize it, but they will say what they're sort of on one side of things, they'll say what they're trying to achieve. But then it's the worst of it is when somebody says, oh, that's all very well, but I'd like to change. And having seen it now, I'd like to change it to this.
I'd like to move the light switch 2 inches.
Absolutely. Now, what we've got situations at the moment, and this makes it a big challenge. And unfortunately, I don't know if it's because successive governments actually sort of do this. They keep changing the rules and change the rules so often.
Yeah.
When you actually sort of look at it, when you actually plan, because there's an awful lot of development land purchased, 7 or 8 years ago, and it was a remarkably good sort of at the particular time. The price was good, everything about it was good, but now, unfortunately, because of the way that the law is changing and properties are now being constructed, they need to be almost sort of airtight to the extent that you can sort of you can't breathe almost sort of within them. And as a consequence of that, the whole understanding has to sort of change. So somebody who bought the land 6-7 years ago, particularly with the changes that have come through in the last couple of years, Michelle mentioned it, Grenfell as well, the way things are tightened up. You need fire doors here that you didn't possibly sort of need sort of previously. And now all of a sudden, when the actual sort of builders looking at it, because we're now expecting, I think somebody was saying we're back up to building over 300,000 properties a year now. But the thing is, with what's expected, some of these developers are saying, well, actually, no, there's no point in starting now because it's going to cost us far too much because the details have changed, because the quality's changed, because we've now got to do this. We've now got to put heat pumps in. We've now got to put this in. And we can't do this and we can't do that. And because of the cost change, because of the government intervention and the intervention, and sometimes it's a bit of an overkill because you've got people making decisions. Michelle's fully aware of this. People make decisions about conditions and quality who have no understanding of it. They say, "Oh, this will be good. Oh, net zero is a great idea." Well, it has its advantages, does net zero, but only to a certain extent. And I think what we're finding now, we're trying to do a little bit of overkill on some things, and it's putting costs right out of it. And of course, this is where we fall into, as we get the bill. I remember Michelle saying this was an absolute beauty. It was her property, I think, and she's turned around to the bill and said, "Where's the window gone?" Ah,
well, this window behind me. I'm at home today. That window right there.
Well, I bought it off plan, but unfortunately, we put the house next door to it far too close, so you can't have a window. Ah, right, okay. What does that change the price? But apparently it doesn't. However, there's buying off plan and there's not. But it is the changing conditions, and because conditions change, demand changes, quality changes, and of course, people change their mind. It's these changes which are sort of coming through. So you can only get things as watertight as you can, but you've got to keep your eye on the detail. And it's the detail that counts. And that's where somebody like Michelle is an absolute sort of star.
Yeah,
you need somebody like her to keep her eye on that.
I could not agree more. Michelle's a bit of a walking encyclopedia of this kind of stuff. We've had many discussions. Forgive me for dropping the C word in. Contracts are always Michelle. I knew
not the only one. Everyone, a lot of people.
I knew I could trigger you by dropping that in. I knew I could trigger you. All right. So yeah. So if, as Hemingway might have said, construction is a movable feast. So certainly, as far as costs are concerned, what you began at the beginning could well change many times. And if you're not careful, a very profitable project can end up making you bankrupt by the end if you don't have someone like Michelle involved. But anyway, enough of that. Thank you so much, Michelle, for taking the time out to be here. Always a pleasure. Hamish McClay, of course, set this thing up in the first page. Sage words. And to all of you watching, and thank you for the comments. Thank you, Ahmed. I appreciate your time. And keep watching. We're going to have plenty more of these. Until next time, keep your feet on the ground. Keep reaching for the stars. And these rather weird and troubling times, look after your mental health. Take care. Bye-bye now.